All right, and this is the Lulich Corner. I'm Jordan Lulich, and today I get the pleasure of sitting down with Allie Rae Mishler with Cosden-Mishler Appraisers. So first off, Allie, thank you so much for joining us and sitting down and taking the time to talk about appraisals. I really appreciate it. And why don't you just open up with telling a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. So as you said, my name is Allie Rae Mishler. I work for Cosden-Mishler Appraisers. I'm part owner of the company, and my mom actually started this business as Cosden-Langford Appraisers almost 35 years ago.
Very cool.
So yes, so I've had the pleasure of working directly with her, and I feel so grateful to have been taught everything I know from her. She's like one of the best in the industry. So it's been a very great experience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So I think I just want to start with the basics. First off, what is appraisal and what type of appraisals do you guys handle? Because, for a lot of people, they may be unfamiliar with what an appraisal is or what the difference between a valuation from a realtor versus an appraisal is.
Right. So what realtors normally do, they're called brokers' price opinions. So they're not as detailed as what we do as appraisers. So regularly, the most common type of appraisal we'll do is for a mortgage or a lender.
Okay.
And that's to kind of secure their collateral. So we're working for the lender, not the client or borrower, just to kind of make sure that they're mitigating their risk appropriately. So we also do appraisals for, which you're probably more familiar with, but divorces and estate purposes.
Yep.
And then also a lot of the time realtors will reach out to us directly if they're not exactly sure where to start with a price point for a listing or something like that. So we do a lot of different appraisals for a lot of different purposes.
Okay. And we're talking strictly residential real estate
Yes.
for your purposes.
Correct. We are just residential appraisers. So there are certified general appraisers out there. None of us at our company, my company, are licensed to do that.
Okay.
So.
Because you've got commercial and then business appraisals and
Correct.
jewelry appraisals. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that goes way above my pay grade.
So what's the difference between an appraisal and a home inspection? As an appraiser, are you going in and are you trying to identify things that are wrong with the property, or what are you looking for as with your appraiser's point of view?
Right. So when we go into a house, we're looking at things that add value. So that's not to say we won't make note of deferred maintenance or safety hazards, because for a lot of lenders, they do need to know those things because, like I said, we're mitigating their risk, especially for like FHA and specific types of appraisals. But we're not as concerned with the structural and mechanical systems. We don't get that in depth with that kind of stuff for code enforcement compared to a home inspector.
Okay.
So we're coming up with a value. They're looking at like the safety and overall integrity of the property.
Okay.
So there are some major differences there. However, we do all come out to the property and do a full inspection. So it does get a little confusing.
So if you have a homeowner that is anticipating that an appraiser is going to come out because maybe they signed a contract, maybe they have a property that's coming to market and they want to get an appraisal done before they list the property on the market.
Yeah.
What are necessary steps that one should take in order to prepare for an appraisal to be done?
Yeah. So just to start out, when we come out for an appraisal inspection, we're going to take pictures of all of the interior and exterior of the house, and we're going to measure the entire exterior. So we're going to submit a sketch with our appraisal. So you'll have a layout of the house. We're also looking at mainly the finishes, the upgrades, the condition of the property, major things you pulled permits to do, stuff like that. So it depends on the appraisal. So for FHA appraisals, we have to check utilities, water, lights, things like that. We'll even have to go up in the attic. But to prepare for an appraisal, generally, I mean, everyone likes to go into a clean house. However, we understand that you live there. There's no need to spend hundreds of dollars to have your house professionally cleaned, like nothing super crazy. But just make sure it's tidy. We can see the finishes, and you have maybe a list of upgrades. If you have a list of things you've done, that's super helpful for us as well.
So, like, I just had a client yesterday who received an appraisal back, a buyer under a purchase and sales agreement, and the appraisal didn't appraise for the purchase price of the property. So in what circumstances, do you see clients that try to appeal an appraisal, and what would you give that person who receives a loan denial because the appraisal didn't match up with what the purchase price was?
So when that happens, there's a few different avenues people can take. So obviously the borrower can bring the difference to the table if they still want to close on the property. Or they have, if there's an appraisal contingency, they have an excuse to back out of the sale.
Right.
So what people often don't understand is we deal through appraisal management companies. So we don't deal directly with the borrower generally, or even the lender a lot of the time. So we can't just make a change if you call us and say, hey, I disagree with what you did. It has to go through the proper channels, through the lender. So they have to send us the request. It happens. I mean, there's sometimes information we've missed. There's plenty of ways to appeal an appraisal through your lender.
Yeah.
And if there's missing information or there's comps you thought we should consider, we're happy to take it into consideration and take another look at the property. So it's definitely not an end all be all kind of thing. There's ways to go around it.
There's ways you can do it. And you and I have talked a little bit about this. And I know you're second generation, Vero Beach, you're from this area. But for the appraiser that's maybe driving up from Miami, right? And who's like trying to appraise a property, doesn't understand the neighborhood, doesn't understand, the values, doesn't understand like the inner workings
just
of
the
county.
Yep.
And that homeowner receives an appraisal for their property that is just not in line with what any local would agree with.
Yep.
Then there's the channels too, but that homeowner shouldn't call up the appraiser in order to try to appeal it.
Correct. If it is for a loan, it all has to go through the lender. I can't just make those changes. But that kind of stuff happens. That's why geographical competence is so important in your appraisal or in your appraiser. So that also gives you good grounds to appeal the appraisal.
Yeah.
So if you know that their company operates out of Miami or Palm Beach and they might not work as often here, you do have grounds to stand on to get a different appraisal done.
But now as a homeowner or even a borrower who's getting an appraisal done for a loan for a property that they're purchasing, they've got no ability or discretion or control over what appraisers use for that property.
So
is that correct?
Yeah, there's a little wiggle room there, especially with more like private lenders.
Okay.
So you can request a specific appraiser or say, I mean, that doesn't mean that they'll grant you that.
Okay.
So, but you can say, I've worked with this lender or this appraiser in the past and they've done great. I know they've worked long in this market area. I'd love for you to use them. And sometimes we get the orders, sometimes we don't. But that whole situation with appraisal management companies is super important. It happened after 07, 08 in order to prevent collusion between lenders and appraisers since we took so much of the blame for the market crashing back in 07, 08.
Yep.
So
added security, more accountability. I understand the perspective, but
Agreed.
I didn't know that. So that's something new. So what you're saying is you could talk to your loan officer. Is that the person, if you're a borrower, talk to your loan officer and just say, hey, I've used this appraiser before. I'd like to use this appraiser, rather than have someone that's out of town. And it's worth an ask. In some cases, you've seen that there's actually some discretion in which a loan officer has in order to choose a certain appraiser for.
It's just important to remember it's more of a recommendation for them. Like you can't actually request it and expect.
I require this, otherwise I'm not going to use it. Yeah, you can't do that.
That is not allowed. They will not like that.
Okay. So from the seller's point of view, there's a lot of people, and I'm sure we've got some audience out there that are purchasing properties which they were trying to maximize value, right? And so even some clients they have short-term goals of maybe to purchase a property, try to increase the value, rent it or sell it, or try to get some profit in terms of trying to fix up and renovate the property. Yeah. So what are ways to maximize the value of a property in terms of renovations as what you're looking for from an appraiser's point of view? And what are traps? What are ways in which money's wasted that you want to stay away from?
So I think something important for people to understand about the appraisal process in general is that our job is to try to quantify what a typical buyer would be looking for in a market. So things that are important to you, like things that are important to a specific seller or buyer, are generally what we're looking at, what we're considering. So we're not doing some crazy formula that you guys don't understand. Like we're looking at it from that perspective, from your perspective. So kitchen renovations, bath renovations, flooring, things like that, those are things that people would love to have done in a new house. If they're purchasing a new house, things that they don't have to look into doing, know.
It's like the quality of those. So when you say kitchen, flooring, so like different countertops, does that make a big difference? Or, does a vinyl versus a ceramic floor make a big difference? Or is there a trap there in terms of as far as the quality of those different items that you're mentioning?
There's definitely a difference. So a lot of that also has to do with the market area. So if you're talking about a neighborhood where the homes predominantly have Formica countertops, it won't make as big of a difference to upgrade to granite. right?
Okay.
Because I'm comparing them to other houses in the neighborhood.
Right.
And the high price is only as high as what's in that market area.
Yep.
So it does depend. However, would I renovate a kitchen that already has Formica with new Formica? No. You know? So
Right. You want to
things
make a
that
difference
sense.
as far as your investment goes. Yeah.
And then like structural systems and mechanical systems like the roof, plumbing, AC, those are always big selling points for buyers as well.
Roof, I'm sure, is huge too.
Oh yeah,
with all the insurance issues.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's been crazy lately.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
yeah, definitely a big selling point
Okay.
there. And the material of the roof. So like a metal roof that insurance might loan on for an extra 5 to 10 years. That's a big selling point for a lot of buyers too. So
One of the things that is talked about, especially in this area, because we live in such a unique area, and it seems that a lot of people are moving down south from up north in New York and Massachusetts and New Jersey, and then at the same time, there's people moving north. They're moving up from Miami to West Palm Beach and to Stewart, and now we're really starting to get people coming up from down south, and so we're seeing a surge of people. And it's similar to, if you look at Stewart, it's similar to how Stewart has expanded and how Stewart's grown in the last 5 to 10 years. It's really, they've seen exponential growth in their property prices, specifically with the barrier market and the luxury market.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm curious from your perspective, to what extent do you study, or to what extent do you see where on the barrier island or on the luxury market, you appraise a property for $1 million or $2 million, and then there's a sale price for that same property for $3 million, right? So there's record-breaking sales that are, from your perspective, you can't put a valuation because there's been no other sales in the community, but because of what this area is bearing and what buyers will just pay for it, there's record-breaking sales. So to what extent do you see that, and to what extent, how do you factor that into the valuations that you put on properties?
yeah, so that happens all the time.
Really?
I mean, I definitely see it. There's been times where we've had to go down to West Palm Beach for comparable sales, because when you're breaking that ceiling in a certain market area, there's not a whole lot else you can do.
Yep.
So that comes back to geographical competence and having the knowledge to be able to adjust between those areas, as far as West Palm Beach or as far north as, Melbourne Beach, things like that. So we're spread all across the Barrier Island.
That's hard, though.
It is.
I mean, West Palm and Melbourne are completely different markets. I mean,
Correct.
Melbourne Beach versus Vero Beach.
Oh, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And the other thing is they don't use the same formulas to come up with their assessed values. So we're looking at, it's not apples to apples when you get into those kinds of areas. So it definitely gets complicated, and we do have to find a way to do it. So one of the things we have to look at as appraisers is we're not just looking at like local trends in the market. We're looking at all of the state of Florida and all national trends, and as far out as we can get to kind of figure out what's going on. So like socioeconomic issues and like election years and things like that all impact what we do.
Okay.
So we have to take all of that into consideration. I don't think we have time.
Yeah, to dive into it. I'm like,
No.
what's trending? What's going on? But
it's a lot.
yeah. So you're taking that, factoring it in. So, and I guess that would become really relevant for when you don't have a comparable sale within the vicinity for a house. Then you have to take these other outside factors in equation into coming up with an appraised price.
Right. And I mean, when you're looking at something on the Barrier Island that's over an acre and there's nothing else that's sold over an acre, and you have to go out west to pull something to bracket.
That's not the same.
Right.
Yeah.
So it definitely gets a little tricky.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you mostly see that with the luxury market, or do you see that with like that middle range market where maybe not quite luxury, but the $500,000 to $1 million market?
Yeah, I mean, it happens much more in the luxury market because you're talking about like 7,000, 12,000 square foot of gross living area. You know
That's
what I mean?
That's a big home.
Yeah. So, I mean, we're in the middle range. There's normally neighborhoods in the market area that we can substitute and kind of figure out, right? Just like a typical buyer would not only be looking in that one neighborhood. They might be interested in the neighborhood across the street, or would be willing to buy something 2 miles down the road. So that's a lot easier.
Okay. So it's mostly with that luxury market where there's very unique properties that there's not a direct comparable for that property.
Right. And that same situation happens in historical properties.
Yeah.
So those get very interesting as well.
Yeah. So how much does an appraisal cost? Does it depend upon the property, or is it
Yeah.
like a fixed price, or?
So generally right now, our prices start around $425 for a full appraisal.
Okay.
So an exterior only starts about $375.
Okay.
But that does change. So like 2 years ago when we had no appraisers and no time and we were running crazy,
Yeah.
it was much higher than that. But I mean, as demand increases, people's prices increase. So that's pretty standard. It also depends on the complexity of the property. So if you're waterfront, like we're talking about multi-acre parcels on the ocean, that's more expensive than something in Point West.
Because you're studying more of these factors,
Yeah,
right?
of
And it
course.
takes a little bit more time to come up with
Exactly.
that valuation.
The time is also a factor. And people often think I'm out at their house for 15 minutes to an hour and that's like it.
Yep.
That is scratching the surface of the data collection I'm doing. I'm going to spend anywhere from 4 to 36 hours working on a report, depending on the complexity of it.
Wow.
So it just depends on the type of loan, the type of property, if it's FHA or an REO, and I have all those additional factors to consider, the prices do go up with that.
Yeah. And one of the areas that we've worked on together is, you've got two people who own a property and there's some type of dispute and they're not getting along and there's a falling out.
Yep.
These are partition actions that we handle. So we see commonly, one wants to sell, one wants to keep the property. And so my first piece of advice that I give these people is get an appraisal done.
Yeah.
Get an appraisal because an appraiser goes through more requirements and they're looking at things differently from a realtor. So
Absolutely.
what requirements does it take in order to become an appraiser?
So to start, you have to become a trainee appraiser. So that takes 100 hours of qualifying education, which you can do online or in person. And then you have to log 1,500 hours under a supervisory appraiser within at least a year. So then you take another 100 hours of qualifying education and you have to pass a state and national exam. So it's definitely a lot. I believe you also have to have a bachelor's degree or an associate's degree in a certain field, like economics, real estate, business, something like that.
Okay.
So the qualifications are definitely up there. It has a really high barrier to entry, which is why there's a lack of appraisers right now. Because it's not the easiest field to get into, and supervisors don't want trainees as much as they used to.
Yep.
That's a big liability. So
It's hard to get mentored and it's hard to get those hours to begin with.
Definitely.
And so, out of the landscape of appraisers, what makes Cosden-Mishlers uniquely qualified in order to handle a client's appraisal?
Yeah. So like I said at the beginning, my mom started this company, Janice Cosden, 35 years ago. So she's been a part of the local real estate market for longer than I've been alive. So
It's a long time.
It
Yeah.
is. And I have learned everything from her. She's trained everyone in our office. She knows the nuances and stigmas in all the neighborhoods. I mean, she knows things that I haven't even considered. So we are definitely uniquely qualified to take on local residential needs. And we recently actually expanded into Brevard and Port St. Lucie.
Very cool.
And we have a certified residential appraiser that covers Stewart, Martin County, a little bit of Palm Beach, and all of Okeechobee.
Okay.
So we have our market areas covered.
Treasure Coast, Space Coast area.
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
So all together, we compare notes and have a good idea of what's going on in your local market. So.
Good. And how can people contact you if they want to learn more or order an appraisal?
Yeah, so they can email us at info@cosden-mishler.com. And then also just go on our website, cosden-mishler.com.
Cool.
And we have an appraisal request form on there and all of our phone numbers and contact.
Well, that's going to wrap it up. I'm Jordan Lulich. This was the Lulich Corner. And today we dived in and talked about appraisals. Listen in for our next podcast and we'll see you soon. Thank you.